All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back in Betsperts Golf here. I'm Ryan Noonan for our first look research show for the 2025 Sony Open Wai'alae Country Club second leg of the Aloha Swing, first full field event of the season. Full field events look a little different than they have in the past, but again, in relation to what we saw last week, obviously, Kapalua, we do not have a small field. We do not have a no-cut event. This is 144 golfers, I believe, is where we'll be at the end, with obviously a cut. So excited to jump into this one. Ron, a little under the weather today. Just going to be me walking through some of our new tools, actually some stuff that we have live on the site that we did not even have last Monday when we met for our first look at the plantation course. Some new stuff on the site for Betsperts Golf, which I think is going to really help this process and something that we really want to build this Monday show in particular around being able to really look at the data instead of, some narratives that we think of how courses are playing, really looking at how this course is played and kind of trying to build a story around the data to fill out our betting cards, our DFS player pools, all those things this week. Appreciate if you hit subscribe here on YouTube. That way you can catch all the things that we have going on at Betsperts Golf. And you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Monday show in particular, I would say both actually really the Tuesday betting show where Andy and I build a model and get into that stuff too. Probably a better YouTube hang than podcast just because we do share the screen. We do share the rabbit hole and some of the tools that we have on Betsperts Golf. So a little harder on the audio side, but I try to make the best of it that I can if you are an audio only person. I know you typically going to be listening to a podcast myself more than I am watching a YouTube video. So I'm trying to structure it that way for you as well. All right. First, let's take a look back on, what we saw last week or yesterday, the finish of the Century. A lot of discourse around the Century. People having, it's a birdie fest for sure, right? I mean, Hideki, shout out to Hideki, 35 under to win. Morikawa, 32 under. 3 off the pace and coming in second. And a lot of people have some struggles with that. And I don't know. I feel like we do a lot of this nitpicking and I don't necessarily love it. There are definitely some courses that probably need to be fired into the sun that we don't need to have in the rotation on an annual basis. But I don't know. It is what it is. The test is the test. And it might not be a technical test, but having to get to the low 30s definitely is a demand that is unusual. Doesn't fit every golfer. Probably not every golfer on tour loves it either, but I think it's probably a soft landing spot to start the season for these guys. And I think we've seen it. Where you go into the Sony the next week where we've typically had, a trend where actually kind of flown in the face of the last couple of years. But typically, you're in a better spot having that competitive rep under you heading into the Sony if you were able to tee it up the previous week at the plantation course. So I don't know. I'm fine with wedge fests. I'm fine with the occasional, 80-yard rollout or these 400-yard drives. It is what it is. It's not in the middle of summer. We're not holding a major here. It's going to be hard for them to do anything with that a lot of land to make that way more difficult than it is. So it is what it is. We don't have a lot of 35 under birdie fests on the card. And we typically, the birdie fests don't usually draw the strongest of fields either. So it is interesting, I think, where, you don't have like most of these guys, Morikawa, Hideki, obviously the top of the board isn't going to Craig Ranch, right? We're not getting those guys to fire off there. So it's interesting to see kind of the top of the board fire at a birdie fest too. So again, it's a one-off. I think enjoy the ocean views, take it in and, kind of get you, soft landing to start the season. Now we go over to a different island. We head over to Honolulu, which is a little bit of a different track and test for everyone here at the Sony. I love this event. I've had some success here. You could say that I've had some tortured success here because I have the runner-up in 3 of the last 4 years. That's not necessarily great. Maybe if you're betting each ways all the time, which I'm starting to do a little bit. I've actually already fired it in each way this morning, which covers, some positions if you fall a little bit short. I also got the winner here in 2023. So the one year that I didn't get the runner-up, I did get Siwoo here back in 2023. I believe it was Neiman back in 2021. I had Russell Henley when Hideki chased him down the following year. Then Siwoo, and then last year went to the well, as I often do with my guy Keegan Bradley, friend of the show. So look, I've had some success here. I like these types of tracks. I think the data is really strong on courses like this, and I think those are weeks that lend themselves for me having a good week. So hopefully we can do that together here and land on some of the best players in this field. It's a pretty decent field. You're looking here on the screen at Ron's preview up on the site, PGA Splits 101, available for our subscribers, as are all these tools that we're going to get into today. There are some changes, I would say, with how this course is playing. And not necessarily how the course is playing or that there's been any massive renovations over the last year or two, but I think you're seeing it will show the data. There's an increase in terms of how golfers are attacking this course. Now, the great equalizer, as we typically have on coastal courses, will be wind. Now, a lot of this course is tucked in a little bit, which does minimize some of the wind's impact, though the early forecasts here are, and we'll obviously have to monitor. This is a Monday morning. We're talking about, 4 days out. Looks like it's going to be a windy week. So we'll have to see if there ends up being a wave advantage. I would not build a DFS lineup today when salaries come out and fall in love with it. I think there's definitely going to be something that we need to monitor in terms of wind. I think in terms of betting outrights early in the week, it's something that I like to do. I do think looking at winds, we'll look at it through the rabbit hole lens this morning. I want to have a little bit of a lean on golfers that have showed up at least decent in scenarios where there's been windy conditions, sustained winds over the past. So we'll look into that a little bit this morning here as well. So again, you're going to hear a little bit this week that it is a technical track, positional golf. I definitely agree that there is something to that. It is a spot where you want to be in the right side of the fairway. If you're in the rough, you still want to be in the right side in terms of your angle into the green here. But I think we've seen an increase in driver, and it's less of a driving accuracy mid-iron game, where it's still going to be a mid-iron game. But I think you see some spots where there's some angles that can be cut, and guys are doing that at a little bit of a higher rate. This is tips to tails, Bermuda grass, just like we had last week. Though these are, again, you will hear, I think that these are small greens this week. These are not small greens. They are the 8th largest on tour relative to what we saw last week at Kapalua. They are postage stamps because the Kapalua greens are massive. But these are not small greens. They are flat, though, especially in relation to what we saw last week. So the test is a little bit different. But I do think there is something to be said, but there is a more of a mix for some sort of hybrid total driving that leans a little bit more on distance than you would have thought in years past, and then mid irons. And we'll see actually where the mid irons fall in the data, because again, we have all that this week. So let's jump into it. I'm going to share some of these things with you guys here. You can jump in the chat if you had any questions on YouTube. Happy to help anything specifically that you want to look at this week here too. But I also want to look at here. Let's use our new, before we get into the rabbit hole, I want to show you our new course stats page. This is new. We launched it on Tuesday. This was not available on Monday when we met last time to talk. And this is, and I think in combination with reading Ron's preview, which is going to be the first piece of content that's up on the site every week, Sunday night, Monday morning, starting your research here is a great place to do it. This is, again, you yourself, if this is your thing, you like to get into the data of it, validating what you've heard or read with what actually is played out at the course over the last handful of years is the best way to do it. And this is going to give you some leanings and how to start to build your rabbit hole model for the week, because you're going to start to understand, what do I need to accentuate in relation to the field? Where can guys separate? All those different things. So let's take a look at it here. All right, you can see whole stats. If you want to see, scoring average of the scores, each hole, birdie rates, par, bogey, double, all that stuff. fantastic in terms of, what hole ranks the hardest, all those different things. When you jump down here, the course metrics section, this is where it's at, guys. You're not going to find something like this anywhere else. It is searchable with all of the different drop downs that are available in the rabbit hole too, which is just absolutely outstanding. You continue to scroll down here, you're going to see past leaderboards to be able to see, scores for each of the rounds, all those different things. Super helpful as well. And let's jump back up into the course metric section. Defaulting it to off the tee. This is what I'm talking about here a little bit. When you look at driving distance here, PGA Tour average over the last handful of years, last 5 years, driving distance here is 294 off the tee. 5-year average here, 289, hanging back not by much. You can see last couple of years right around there, so a little bit shorter. And you can see here driver usage on the PGA Tour is about 62% over, on average. This course, it's been just a tick under 62%. So you're about 6% less than driver than normal. But you kind of see that trending up a little bit. Now, part of that that's driving this number down is the 2020 year where you only saw 48% driver usage off the tee. Now, it was a windy year, and you look back and you can see here finishing scores, Cam Smith won that year at 11 under in relation to where we've been the last handful of years in the upper teens, even in the low 20s. So that was the windy year. And if that's what we end up getting this year, this is probably more indicative of what we can expect versus the trend of where we've been heading, which is almost flat to the PGA Tour average event. So again, this is so useful, guys. I mean, if you start to get an understanding of the wind is going to be a problem this week, well, when we go in and build some off the tee stuff in the rabbit hole, you probably want to select driver usage less than driver and get an understanding of ball striking when less than driver is the prominent usage off the tee for these guys, or even mixed versus, driver heavy. So again, that sticks out as an outlier. And again, we can kind of draw a straight line to why that was when we look here at the finishing position scores and stuff like that happened in past years. So, the 320 plus drives happening significantly less, but again, not really outside of the 2020 event. So again, if we have benign conditions this week, then you're going to see some very normal driver tendencies off the tee, guys gripping and ripping, maybe not without penalty, but definitely guys not afraid to take the club head cover off and let it go. Same thing, driving accuracy. You could see the accuracy spiked a little bit there in 2020 because we saw that correlates with driver usage going down. Guys club down to find the fairway because they need to keep the ball in play and controlling your ball from the fairway versus the rough into the green. On any course is easier if you've ever played golf. So that matters. And this is, again, great data to kind of show why that is. So, take it with a grain of salt. There's definitely an outlier year in here in this data set. And I would say you maybe need to, do something to eliminate that. But I think this might be super relevant to what we see this year if the weather kind of holds. Good drive percentage. You can see kind of flat to the tour average. You can see, again, rough tendencies, left rough, right rough. Insane level of detail. If you really want to get super granular, I think that's probably just good to have, but not necessarily super duper relevant in terms of, predictiveness. Distance from the edge of the fairway. If you've watched the show, hung out with us in years past, you know that I am a massive proponent for distance from the edge of the fairway. You can see distance from the center of the fairway here as well. I mean, this is it, guys. And again, I'll do my rant real quick if it's new to you. I think driving accuracy is probably one of the more noisy stats that we have in this space and what we do. It is a binary stat. It is yes or no, accurate as it pertains to fairway or not fairway. It doesn't really tell a great picture of what we're looking to do when we talk about being able to control your golf ball, being able to keep yourself in position to score. Because off the fairway and into the first cut by 3 to 6 inches is way different than duck hooked into the woods from a real life golf standpoint, from a data capturing standpoint, from a driving accuracy standpoint. It's the same thing. So if you think that that's super useful, knock yourself out. I don't find it to be super useful. When we want to have situations where we care about accuracy, really what we're doing is, can you keep your ball in play? Can you control your ball off the tee? And over, there are going to be outliers in there, but over a course of, a season, 50 rounds played, I'm going to get way more information from distance from the edge of the fairway than I am going to get from a binary ranking in driving accuracy. So I almost never use it. Distance from the edge of the fairway, significantly better, because it tells me, again, if you miss, is your miss not that bad? Because pretty much any course is going to have some sort of, graduated rough where, you might just be in the first cut, or, even the second cut in some places, versus where you get into the real thick, heavy Kikuya type stuff where, you're going to have to be chopping it out sideways on some courses. So I love distance from the edge of the fairway. It matters a ton. Use it over driving accuracy. You'll be better off for it. So you can see that here as well. Again, I'm going to go into approach shot distribution, because I think this is really what I want to show you guys a little bit this week. I also often push back on bucketing approach shot distribution in my models versus just looking at approach or approach on short courses or stuff like that, because I think it's really hard to get an understanding of how you properly rate that or weigh it in a model equally across the board, because we know that there are going to be situations where, Kevin Kisner is going to be very different than, Taylor Pendrith in terms of how many shots they're hitting from each bucket if they're hitting driver off the tee. So if I have to weigh it across an entire field of golfers, it can get a little bit noisy. Except I think when you see some outlier positions in terms of approach shot distribution, and I think this would constitute an outlier we see here. So you see pretty flat, you see some spike weeks, but in terms of, shorter from the fairway, not very much. All this is kind of in line. Rough from 50 to 125, and you break it down to total. So we have fairway, rough, and total distribution from all these little metrics. So this is like, gap wedge, lob wedge type stuff, pretty below, a little bit below average. So I'm not really rating that too much or giving that any credence here this week. Fairway from 125 to 150. You can see here a little bit higher than average, but not too much. If you look here, same thing, 5-year course average in that range on total. You're a little bit higher in the shorter irons. It's a short golf course, par 70, just a little over 7,000 from the tips. So a little bit over. Really, when you start to get into the bigger gap here, as you look here at total from 150 to 175, 5-year course average, just a tick under 28%, which is about 8% higher than a tour average event. So you're basically getting this range for a lot of the golfers on a lot of these holes. So again, we have par 70. So, par 5s here, everyone gets, they are 2 of the easiest par 5s on tour. Obviously, we have our 4 par 3s, and then the par 4 scoring is something that matters a ton here. So you can see, in relation to a tour average event, and even more so in the windy year, you guys probably push back towards the 175 end of this a little bit more. It shows up. It shows up in a pretty big way. So this is something that I want to look at this week in relation to other weeks where I'm maybe a little hesitant to jump into this metric in particular, because I think it could be a little bit noisy. Sorry, I need water every couple minutes here. You can see here 200 plus, especially from the fairway. Significantly less significant than a tour average event, right? So this bucket here, this 150 to 175, shows up. And again, having this at your fingertips to be able to see what you're told if you read content or listen to content. And again, the ability to come here and validate this and look at outliers and different stuff is, I think, a massive, massive help. So I want to look at that this week here. Again, you can go into approach to get an understanding of, the greens and reg rates, And again, I want to always kind of look at here this 2020 outlier here. I think it matters a ton. So you can see green and reg from the rough and how that pertains to a tour average event. And you can see that here too if we go back to approach shot distribution. You can get a little bit more sense of understanding there too. A rough approach. If you want to break down these proximity buckets specifically, you can too, which I think is pretty cool. And you're not going to find this stuff anywhere else, which I think is awesome. You can see green and reg from the fairway bunker. They are here. They're pretty prominent, but it shouldn't concern you because you're seeing a massive spike over a PGA Tour average event in terms of guys hitting greens and reg from a fairway bunker. But green and reg from the rough, a little bit below average. You can see the proximity from the rough is a little bit higher. So you see over the last 5 years, PGA Tour average proximity from the rough about 44 feet. We've seen here upwards of 49 feet in the winds. Even last year was a tick over 49 feet. 5-year average about 3 feet above the tour average, which is interesting to see. Going for the green percentage is a little higher than tour average as well, because that makes sense because short course, par fives in play for everybody. It's not anything that we really need to concern ourselves with. If you are not making, birdie or better on these par fives, you are just not competing this week. When you have a really high greens and reg rate, which is what we have here, around the green, scrambling matters less. Because again, if you are having to scramble, you're also losing strokes to the field because everyone else is already on the green and putting. So, these things I think they matter a little bit, but I think they matter a little bit less. Same thing. You can see the putting stuff. Putting matters obviously here because again, we are, I wouldn't call it a birdie fest, but to be able to separate, and we're trying to pick a winner, right? So you need to be able to go low. You get a sense of one putt percentage a little bit lower than tour average. Your 3-putt avoidance is a little bit easier because again these greens aren't really really big. And again, if you're finding the fairway here, you're going to be on the green, so make sure you are you're dialed in here. You can see 3-putt avoidance here a little bit better than the tour average. Scoring, this gives you an idea of rounds, birdie or better rates from the fairway, from the rough, birdie to bogey rate. Again, last week we were at like 4, which is insane. You can see here PGA Tour 1.87 average over the last 5 years, and this course average is a tick below that at 1.56. You can get into the par 4, par 5, par 3, par 4, par 5 scoring. You can see here birdie or better rates on par 5s here, 64%, which is 15% higher than a tour average event. So you got to make your birdies on the par 5s, and a little bit harder on the par 4s, but that's kind of where you can separate yourself. That's what we're going to do, is find the data to get an understanding of where guys can separate themselves. Again, I hope you find this, useful and get a sense of some of the stuff up here too. If you want to see course type, things that you can build into the rabbit hole, go into tools, go into course database. This is all here for you. Another thing that we have here is the tournament cheat sheet. I'll show you that here real quick as well. You can mess around with the time frame. So this is last 12 months. I can't cycle out small fields, small data cycles like I can in the rabbit hole. But you can see here last 12 months how golfers are fared in the strokes gain metrics. You can see driving distance, driving accuracy there as well. I'm going to push to make that distance from the edge of the fairway. So I think it's better for us. Recent form, you can see here recent form. Last event played, Hideki Matsuyama won. So we already have all that data uploaded for you here from last week's plantation course. You can get a sense of how guys have played as of late. And then course history. So right here, one view, you can get a sense of who's played well at this track. Again, one tournament cheat sheet. If you just want rolling form, how they played of late and how they played on this track, you can get this here in one view. Again, into the tools section, tournament cheat sheet to drop down here. And course history has been pretty sticky at this event over the last handful of years. Who's played well? Typically, And I don't know really why that is. But Data Golf has a really cool, how sticky is course history, and really outside of Augusta National, Wai'alae is the second most predictive course history track that we have out here. Another thing, a note from the show, Justin Ray, fantastic Twitter follow. Justin has insane data. I love listening to the nuggets that Justin has. 9 of the last 11 winners. Or I'm sorry, 8 of the last 11, because last year, Grayson Murray, shout out to Grayson. I'm sure we'll have lots of good Grayson memories this week. Unfortunately, he's not here to defend his title. 8 of the last 11 winners at the Sony played the previous week at the Century. And the cut rate for those guys who were in the field the following week here was over 80% over the last 4 years. We also don't have a lot of debutante winners. The last debutante in the past 19 stops here is Russell Henley in 2013. So, and again, I don't know if that's just early season rust or if there are certain nuances to the course that I'm not necessarily seeing. Maybe a combination of that, knowing where, to miss, knowing where to, the angles off the tee, or just, having that competitive 4 rounds under your belt from previous week leads itself to this being a little bit more predictive in terms of course history and, recent form. So, but I think we've seen and trended that a little bit. Like, I don't believe that Siwoo played the week before when he won back in 2023. Grayson didn't play last year. So we do have a little bit of, that trend is kind of going away. So we'll see. Again, not something that I'm like weighing massively this week. But again, we have 36 guys in the field this week that played last week too. So their hit rate for making the cut has been pretty strong. So starting your looks there does make sense. But again, par 70, tip over 7,000 yards. I want to dig into the winds here because I think it's going to matter. Let's dig into the rabbit hole. Let's build some stuff here. I'm going to show you with the mindset of course history mattering. Let's look at that. Let's look here. We'll go back last 5 years. We'll dig into this. We'll dig into course. Again, you can select all sorts of courses, do some corollary courses. I have some thoughts on that this week too, because I think that could be in play. But let's just look at Wai'alae. I'm sorry. Yeah, let's look at Wai'alae. I'm going to hit apply. And this is going to give me last 5 years at this course. I want to look at average versus rank. You can see here, 20 rounds means the guy's been playing this event every single year. We'll have some smaller stuff too. You do have if you're looking at this for the first time, minimum round feature. So if I want to take out some of the noise of, what I'm looking at, small sample stuff, I can remove that too with a minimum round feature look. But last 5 years, strokes gained total average at Wai'alae. You can see what I think is probably going to be one of the more popular outrights is Benny Ann. Benny Ann was very popular last year, made it to the 3-way playoff. I had Keegan, and I realized while everyone's sweating that playoff that everyone seemed to have Ben An tickets. And, Grayson, no one had the Grayson tickets. People did have Keegan like I did. Grayson shut us up real quick with that putt on the first playoff hole there, which is, tough start to the season there when you think you get home with 75-1 on Keegan. But Ben An, I think, is going to be a very popular click for people this morning to show up well. We've seen it pretty small samples, only played twice, but has played very, very well. Russell Henley, you can see a miscut in here, but otherwise has played very, very well. And it's a Russell Henley track. When you think about what Russell Henley does well, and look, this is a guy that I go to the well on all the time. He's one of my losers for sure. I think he's just getting better though. Again, not a young guy necessarily, not an old guy either, but I think the game is just, I've always felt it's been a little bit disrespected. He's really good at the things that are most predictive week in and week out for success. He's, again, the poster boy of proving that winning golf tournaments, closing on a Sunday, as, again, the 2022 year with Hideki chasing him down, proves that. But look, Henley, in some of the best fields, some of the hardest golf courses in the last handful of years, showed up and played really well. Has had top 10 finishes at Augusta, Pinehurst, was very much in the mix in the back nine on Sunday at the Open Championship this year. So, again, holding all those tickets. So I'm very, very much aware of the times that Russell Henley is in the mix because I am often holding the ticket. So, but again, a spot where total driving, again, he's not super long off the tee, but he's not super short, but he's going to keep himself in play. He's an immaculate wedge player, especially from the ranges that matter this week. And the putter on Bermuda is a Southeast guy, shows up pretty well. So no surprise that Russell Henley has played well here. Nick Taylor has played well here. Chris Kirk has played really well here as well. Was in the mix even a little bit. Ball striking was great here last year. He just couldn't make a putt coming off of his win last year at the Century. Taylor Montgomery, small sample, was played well. Hideki, no surprise. Daniel Berger, very interesting this week. And Daniel Berger, you played a lot of golf in the fall because he had to. This is, again, historically a track that you would think would be very Daniel Berger friendly in terms of how his game plays. Small sample for Ben Silverman. He's got it mostly done, it looks like, with his putter and around the green, which is interesting. Not a lot of sustainability in that per se, so I'm not necessarily stoked to see. It's not like that's a name that I want to chase down the rabbit hole. Corey Connors, again, keeps the ball in play. Wedges, fantastic. Can he make enough putts? That is always the question when you're backing Corey Connors. He's a rabbit hole darling because statistically he's always going to show up as a positive. So yeah, we're waiting. These are salaries. We're waiting for the DraftKings salaries to update here on Monday morning for this event. These are any salaries here are from last week that we have at Capitol. So this is obviously very interesting to see course history. So instead of building them all this morning, I just want to kick through and dig into some of these stats at a higher level. Come back on Tuesday, tomorrow, for our betting show and rabbit hole build. I already have my model on the site. You actually go in here to view expert rankings. You can see here, Matt Vicenzi, Sports Illustrated, his model's in here. Joe I, Preferred Lines podcast. Shout out to Joe. I'll be on that show tonight as well. You can see his model is up here. Mine is already up. You can see Andy Lack, Inside Sports Network, Inside Golf Podcast. Lack's model is up. You can find that there as well. We'll find more from Ron Kloss. Andy will be here. There'll be some other people on Andy Lack's team having their models in here too. This is a great resource. You want to, take a look at other people's models, download them into a CSV. If you're, Excel friendly, weigh them and, spit out your own model based off of other people's. That's great. That's here for you. You can build your own. You can just, someone you trust, you want to look at their model. What are some stats that they have that, you weren't even considering? This is a great resource for you every week to kind of go in there and see what other people are doing if you don't want to build your own. But we'll build our own on the betting show on Tuesday. All right, that's course history at Wai'alae. Interesting, and I think it matters a little bit here this week too. All right, let's look at wind while we're here, because again, I think it's going to matter a little bit. We'll mess around with the sample size. Let's see, I'll go back 3 years. I'm going to go into filter by conditions section here. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And for your knowledge, this is gusty winds north of these numbers. So calm, 0 to 9, moderate, 10 to 18. Windy is gusts of 19 plus. There's a possibility that we have sustained winds in like the 20 plus range this week. So that would be our best bet to capture that. So sometimes when I'm doing this, I would pick moderate and windy to eliminate basically calm conditions. And maybe there's something to that. Go back a bigger sample size and do that. But I just want to look at windy because I think that's what we're going to have here this week. So we'll apply that here. again, all these samples, I probably want at least 30 rounds played just to be statistically relevant. You can really mess around and overweight something off of a really small sample, and it throws off the data. So you're going to be really, really cognizant of that. You can also, again, use the minimum round feature to pull any samples out so you don't really mess around. But let's just see here who plays well in windy conditions over the last 3 years. Now, do I want to look at strokes gained total here? I don't know. I don't. Maybe we can look at it. I don't think it's what I would want to lean heavily on, because that's going to give me more putting and around the green stuff that I think matters this week. What I'm really trying to understand with wind is who controls their golf ball the best. And yes, putting is impacted by the wind, without a doubt. But I don't want to double count basically good putters. I really want to just get an understanding of ball striking in these scenarios off the tee and approach when the course conditions are windy. So I'm going to start there. So just to give you an idea, okay, really small samples for these guys. Luke Lanton, 2 rounds in the wind. It's been great, though. No surprise, by the way. But, I can't, in good faith, keep those 2 rounds for Luke Lanton in the wind. Struggles putting in the wind. Struggles around the green in the wind, right? But not statistically relevant. Let's put an 8 round minimum feature here. Let's see, again, I'll mess around and see if I can, make that different if I need to. But ball striking here, windy conditions, last 3 years. I always am hesitant to go back too far because, golfers change. I don't know. I'm back and forth on that. But again, because I'm kind of hovering around statistical relevant sample size. Corey Connors, best ball striker in the field. And again, by looking at average versus rank, I can get an understanding of the gap between these guys, right? So when you see, if I had ranking, Connors is 1, but Alex Smalley's in the top 10. Well, yeah, that's true, but it's like 0.65 strokes difference. That's a pretty big gap that I think is not told if we're just looking at rank. So Connors, Berger, Kitayama are your top 3. Keith Mitchell, Gary Woodland, Tom Hoagie, Russell Henley, Austin Eckroat, Alex Smalley, Siwoo Kim, Keegan Bradley, Chris Kirk are your top ball strikers in the wind in this field over the last 3 years. Any familiar names? Anything jump out to you there? Pretty well here in the past. Guys that, in general, control their ball off the tee and are pretty good iron players. Right? Keith Mitchell, always one of the top guys in the field in total driving. Long and accurate off the tee. Kitayama has shown that as well. Again, back to Berger, Corey Connors, Henley, Eckroat. Siwoo, winner here. Keegs in the mix. So that makes a ton of sense to me. And I think it's a good way to start, where if you wanted to fire outrights early, I wouldn't necessarily have to start at the top of the board here and see these guys. I want to see some of the other data points that I want. But this feels good. If these guys pop elsewhere, that matters to me quite a bit. I want to look at the other 2. I always like to look at the inverse, because I think sometimes data can be really, really noisy, especially, again, if we're messing around with smaller samples. But I think sometimes when a data set is, I think, big enough to be statistically relevant, I think I really want to look at the tail outcomes, because that tells me a little bit more than just kind of painting with a broad brush. Who has really struggled in these scenarios? Who has been really good in these scenarios? So you see some of the bottom of the board, see guys that, maybe be in consideration for people that could jump out here. Echeverria, again, played great golf this fall. Has struggled in this sample size. Taylor Moore struggled. Harris English, Taylor Montgomery, decent sample size of success here, although smaller sample size, but he's played well here. But not so much in the wind. Ryan Palmer, Texas guy, expecting to be a little bit better in the wind. Guys you might be, again, considering is who I want to mention here a little bit. Denny, Ball striking, yeah, probably, what does that relate to Denny's baseline ball striking? That's really the question that we're asking too. Ben Griffin, I think he's going to show up well in models this week. Ball striking in the wind, 45 rounds, hasn't been great. Matt McNeely, again, playing pretty good golf. Harry Hall, Nick Taylor, Nick Dunlap. Again, interesting to see strokes gained windy conditions. So, again, something you could do, build it into your model, or look at it on the side, make some notes on it. I think is something that you're going to want to look at this week. And again, I don't want to go too much into it yet because we're still a little bit out, but I think the wind could end up mattering. Again, TBD if it's going to be a wave advantage situation or if it's just going to be sustained for rounds in particular. Again, just want to show you that that's something you have access to here and you can take a look at. I want to look at corollary courses because I think it matters this week. I think there are a handful of golf courses where the demand is somewhat similar. There's some, mid-iron, less than 200-yard approach bucket stuff that we saw, 150 to 175, where you have to keep your ball in play off the tee. And, sometimes you have the same agronomy in terms of, Bermuda putting. But Ron lays it out in his preview of what those are. I am going to dive into those here as well. I think Sedgefield is a course that matters for us this week. So I'm going to look at Sedgefield course history. I also think the Seaside course at Sea Island for the RSM matters as well. I think it might not be quite to the degree of positional golf that you see at Harbour Town, but again, I think that Harbour Town matters as well. So I'm going to look at Harbour Town. And I also think Colonial is a great comp course. Colonial is another place where we typically see, I think last year, all 4 rounds at Colonial would have been bucketed in the windy section too. So I think Colonial is a great corollary course for what we want to see this week. Those are the 4 that I'm leaning on this week. Ron has a few more that he wants to take a look at that he has on his list, but these are the 4 that I'm going to apply this week. So I'm going to have to back out sample-wise. And let's see. And again, these are often courses where these guys know that they can play well. So they, a lot of the field that goes to the Sony goes to these courses too. So I think you get a decent sample of rounds played for these guys because they know, oh, this is a place that I need to go. It's a game that, where a course where my game can compete. The data to load. All right. Yeah, we'll see like 40 rounds or so the last 3 years. And again, this is a spot where tee to green and ball striking is really what I'm trying to get a sense of. How you putt matters. I'm going to look at putting through a different lens. But, I really want to get a sense of what I'm trying to do with the corollary courses is how are you getting to the green? How are you approaching your tee shot? And then how are you, what's your ball striking? What's your wedge game? Iron game into these types of courses. So tee to green, ball striking, more relevant to me when looking at the corollary courses versus just the strokes gained total. But we'll look at both. Ball striking, average. Again, I think average is the best way to do this. Rank matters too, but average is going to give you a sense of the deltas between player. All right, I'm going to go 8-round minimum. Chan Kim at the top, but 6 rounds. We haven't got a lot of Luke Clanton at these events. But again, I am not surprised that anything that we're looking at ball striking wise that has Luke Clanton at the top. Small sample, but he is at the top. Small sample as well for Ben Ann, again at the top. Another reason why I think Ben Ann is going to be a popular click. Russell Henley, Corey Connors. We're seeing some similar names, right? Charlie Hoffman. Mac Messner, again, small sample, but has played pretty well on these corollary courses. Bigger sample when we get up to a Lucas Glover. That makes sense. Will Gordon, interesting. Would not be a spot where I would think Will Gordon would pop. 20 rounds played, not great. David Lipsky, Daniel Berger, Austin Eckroat. Patrick Rogers, Adam Svensson, JT Poston, Michael Kim, Keegan Bradley, Tom Kim. So again, some names that are popping up quite a bit. Let's mess with the sample a little bit. And let's just look 5 years. Some of these guys aren't going to change their sample, obviously, but maybe some of the older guys have been around. We'll see a sample that becomes a little bit bigger for those guys. That pops Corey Connors to the top of the list on a 46-round sample. Pretty decent. Luke Clanton still with his 8 rounds. Russell Henley third. Messner there still. Glover, Berger, Hoffman, Ekro, Siwoo, Lipsky, Keegan. You see Emiliano Grillo pop up in there, getting Colonial champion a couple of years ago. Adam Svensson, Webb Simpson. Webb's helped by us backing out to 5 years, that's for sure. Joel Damon, Luke List, which is probably surprising to some, including myself. Seamus Power, nice course history here. So these guys have played a decent amount of the corollary courses on tour, and their ball striking numbers are really good. When you back out to strokes gained total, you could see some of the smaller sample guys have popped a little bit because they are putting well on these surfaces. And most of these courses here are, some southeast stuff. So you are getting some Bermuda grass that is favorable to a Luke Clanton, which makes sense. Again, no names that are super duper surprising. Eric Cole pops up here off the tee. Has been a struggle, but he's putted really well on 0.7 strokes putting in these 28 rounds here in these courses. Ben Griffin as well. Putting has been nice and has stabilized his ball striking numbers. Billy Ho pops up with the putting as well. So again, some commonalities here when we're looking here and start to really get a sense of what the chalk is going to look like in DFS, probably what some of the more popular bets will be this week as well. So, all right, so we're pushing up here time-wise. I want to get to, I think, one more thing here. Well, I want to look at Luke Clanton here, guys. This kid is. Click on any name in the rabbit hole, takes you to the player page. I think the kid's the real deal, for being honest. And again, you get some of these young guys. I'm a big Michael Thor Bjornsson supporter. I want to be, early on him. I want to continue to be early on Clanton too. So let's look at that. Sample small. Just turned 21. We need to get some of this updated on him. But when we look at what he does, just these are the things that end up being predictive long term. Putting, Bermuda, where we're at again this week, his best service. Positive by round, again, not something that I care too much about. Scoring conditions, he's, regardless of how easy or difficult it is, he's been really good. Same thing by field strength, it doesn't really matter. Played better here. Again, small sample, 2 rounds on long courses. So I wouldn't get hung up on this, but this is a shorter course this week for sure. You can say very short, doesn't have any rounds there, or 4 rounds. He's been even. 16 rounds on short golf courses is averaging 2.3 strokes per game, strokes gained per round. It's pretty good. This is in relation to the field or towards PGA Tour averages. So you can see long approaches, not his game, but that's not the demand this week. We have a lot in this bucket of 150 to 200. You can see it's a darker green, which tells you he is above tour average there. Showed some ceiling in terms of how often he is gaining strokes. He's gained in 30 rounds. He's been stroke gain positive in 70% of those. That's pretty good. This guy's can play. We don't have a lot of spring rounds because he kind of came on again in the summer and played some fall events here. But you see the ball striking numbers, guys. I mean, this is it, right? This is I really hesitate to throw out, comparisons to certain guys, but there's nothing that we're seeing here that isn't the elite of the elite in terms of ball striking. Approach numbers off the tee, been in the mix often. Wyndham, 5th, top 2 of the RSM, top 10 the John Deere. So again, like, these are not awesome fields, but again, what matters a ton, the ball striking, the approach stuff, he has it in spades. And you can see the putting matters this week here in Bermuda grass. So again, you can click on any golfer here, search, you'll be able to look at their player page. Again, less detail there on Luke Clanton because he's not been around as long as some of the other guys. You can get a sense of finishing positions along with the tournament results there. You can see here, if we build into, clear this a little bit, total driving. Again, total driving I don't love. I like to do a hybrid of total driving. I think that matters this week more than we've seen in years past. I'm going to back up to the last year and show you this a little bit. Total driving, again, flawed stats, but it is what it is. Again, you're combining 2 stats and how someone ranks in each of those stats to kind of a hybrid number. So that's, it makes my eyes twitch a little bit. And again, it's also bringing in driving accuracy, which, as I told you earlier, I think is a flawed stat. But distance from the edge of the fairway. If we go 8 rounds, just take out some of these small sample guys. Last 12 months, top in this field, distance from the edge of the fairway. Not Chris Cotterill. All right. We got some, Kanaya from Japan, but then you got Russell Henley, Tom Kim, Lucas Glover, Siwoo Kim, Griot, Matt McCarty, interesting, Ben Coles, Brian Harmon. Okay, Putnam, Connors. Again, some guys we're seeing, repetitively. Eckroat, that's interesting. If you look at just total driving, again, combination of those 2 stats, it is Clayton at the top, Max McGreevy, Matt McCarty again, Chris Kirk. I mean, McCarty is also just nice little Corn Ferry spot where you need to go low. Again, had him show up at Black Desert and played some good golf. Awesome to see. Chris Kirk, Corey Connors, Austin Eckroat, Keegan Bradley, Siwoo Kim, Rico, EVR, Sepp. These guys driving accuracy. These guys are keeping the ball in play. Good drives, combination of being able to, even if you miss the fairway a little bit, you're still getting greens and reg. That stuff is matters a ton. But you see Clinton here in comparison to some of these other guys, a little bit higher in terms of driving distance as well. So again, off the tee, it matters a lot. And then if you just go into raw approach, well, let's look at overall approach from the 150 to 175 before we wrap. You can subscribe to the site. You want to do these tools yourself, to the channel so you don't miss an episode. I always tend to go longer on the show when I'm by myself. Sorry about that. All right. We go overall approach 150 to 200. Matt McCarty, Max McGreevy, Kurt Kitayama, Lucas Glover, Sam Ryder, Norlander, Eckroat, Gim, Thor, Clanton, Messner, Damon, Decky, Hoagie, Mitchell. Interesting. That's overall approach proximity in that range. If we look at fairway, this is going to tell us again, we want to kind of be in play on the fairway. We're trying to find winners. We can get these buckets a little bit more. This was the fairway bucket that we saw really matters. And again, Thor, Kitayama, Clanton, Keegs, Connors, Griot, Damon, Bud Cauley, Keith Mitchell, Harmon, Seamus Power, Chandler Phillips, really good wedge player, Bridgman. I mean, look, a lot of the same names here, right? So very, very, very interesting to kind of do this and build models this week, because I think you're going to see there's going to be some chalk, and obviously a great spot for game theory based off of the fact that you're going to see a lot of betting cards, player pools. I always think it's really interesting to see people start releasing content. And you see the cover boy. I tweeted that out the other day because it was really funny. I hadn't got my article out yet, but a lot of guys that I had bet on last week, Sam Burns, Nick Dunlap, Justin Thomas. You saw those guys in a lot of like cover photos for, content articles. I think you're going to see a lot of these guys that we've talked about on the show today being cover photos for people's articles. So yeah, come back. We'll build a model on Tuesday's show. Again, it is 11 Eastern, 10 Central. Andy and myself will go through that. If you want to see other models, other people's models, you can get in here through the expert ranking section. It's a great way for you to see that, see what other people have done. Matt in the chat, is this a similar course to last week? AKA, can Hideki crush the field again? Answer to those are separate. No, not similar to last week. Can Hideki crush this field again? Yes. He's, again, a winner here recently, 2022, and it sets up really well for his game. When Hideki's dialed in, irons are immaculate, off the tee, keeps himself in play, and can get just white hot with the putter, as we saw there. Again, significantly smaller greens, significantly more narrow fairways. So, having to control the ball differently off the tee. It's not grip and a rip driver. So it is a very, very different course than last week, even though we're still in Hawaii. But the answer to the question, Hideki can still, be the class of the field without a doubt. So awesome. Appreciate you guys hanging with me this morning. Again, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss a show. We'll come back again on Tuesday. More content on my betting article up sometime either this evening or Tuesday morning. And Ron's preview is already up on the site, so check that out again. So again, betspertsgolf.com. Subscribe, guys. Do this yourself. This is the best data that's out there. We'll continue to add tools and make the best of the data that we have to help you guys build those betting cards and player pools. So appreciate it.